On this episode of China Uncensored, it was a real coup for China. Hi, welcome back. I'm Chris Chappell. China and Zimbabwe couldn't be closer. Just look at Zimbabwe leader Robert Mugabe and Chinese leader Xi Jinping on his 2015 trip to Zimbabwe. Now there's a close friendship. That's why Xi Jinping said China is Zimbabwe's all-weather friend. At least, that's what Mugabe told reporters. He also famously said that we have turned east where the sun rises and given our backs to the west where the sun sets. Mugabe was even awarded China's Confucius Peace Prize. Yeah, Mugabe's a pretty popular guy. They call him the grand old man of African politics. Well, at least that's what he calls himself. He's 93 years old, been elected president for nearly 40 years in a row. Can you imagine? Oh, and the military. They love him. Why, just last week, the Zimbabwe military swarmed the capital and headed to the state-run broadcaster to deliver this important message.
Comrade R.G. Mugabe and his family are safe and sound, and their security is guaranteed.
Safe and sound. You see, that's just... okay, that sounds a lot like the military just staged a coup. Clearly this caught everyone off guard.
Rumblings of a coup that could oust Mugabe began just 24 hours after the head of the army, General Constantino Chiwenga, threatened military intervention to end a purge of his allies from Mugabe's government.
When it comes to matters of protecting our revolution, the military will not hesitate to step in.
Okay, maybe no one should have been caught off guard. In fact, the situation is being compared to what happened in China almost 40 years ago, the fall of the Gang of Four. During the final days of Mao Zedong's life in 1976, four high-ranking leaders, including Mao's wife, were viciously vying for power. They wanted to replace the grand old man of Chinese politics when the old man died. Ultimately, they were all purged themselves and executed. And in Zimbabwe, it's believed Mugabe's wife Grace and 3 others have been purging opponents to seize power after Mugabe dies. But if Zimbabwe's military thinks it can just waltz right in and seize power, they've got another thing coming. Remember, China is Zimbabwe's all-weather friend. At least that's what Mugabe said. I'm sure China is throwing all their weight and influence behind him. I mean, the Chinese government awarded him that Confucius Peace Prize after all. What's that, Shelley? Oh, Mugabe rejected it because it wasn't from the Chinese government at all. Well, I'm sure the CCP still went to bat for him.
We hope the relevant parties in Zimbabwe appropriately handle their internal matters.
Okay, they've thrown Mugabe under the bus. And that was just an official statement. Look at how my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, is handling it. Why look, the sun is shining after a storm. We have good reasons to believe that as Zimbabwe enters the post-Mugabe era, China will see an improved environment to cooperate with the country. Mugabe, betrayed by the East where the sun rises. The CCP hasn't thrown Mugabe under the bus, they threw him under a tank. Although the Chinese Communist Party does probably like all the tanks on the streets of Zimbabwe, they get a sense of nostalgia. Yeah, that really looks like Zimbabwe just had a military coup. Now normally, this is when conspiracy theorists the world over start talking about how the CIA was really behind it. But this time, it may be a Chinese knockoff. As The Guardian puts it, the world may just have witnessed the first example of a covert coup d'etat of the kind once favored by the CIA and Britain's MI6, but conceived and executed with the tacit support of the 21st century's new global superpower. That superpower? China. Yes, the Chinese regime didn't just throw Mugabe under a tank. They dug a pit, filled it with spikes and acid, threw him in, and then drove over it with a tank. You see, 2 weeks before this all went down, that Zimbabwean general who threatened a coup and then eventually carried it out was in China. According to an international relations specialist at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, it should not be too surprising if Chiwenga wanted to ensure political changes would not anger China because of the close ties between the countries. China and Zimbabwe go way back. The Chinese Communist Party funded Mugabe's African nationalists/Maoist guerrilla fighters in the 1970s. And China was one of the first countries to establish diplomatic ties after Zimbabwe became independent in 1980. Since the West viewed Mugabe as a despot whose bad economic policies and penchant for violence ruined one of Africa's most promising states, Mugabe increasingly turned to China for support. The Chinese Communist Party isn't bothered by leaders with a penchant for violence. So despite Western sanctions, China became Zimbabwe's biggest source of foreign currency and top trading partner, having invested in more than 128 projects in the African country between 2000 and 2012. China has also repeatedly blocked sanctions on Zimbabwe and Mugabe. In recent years, China has given Zimbabwe over $1 billion worth of low-interest loans. The Chinese yuan is even an official currency in Zimbabwe. But then, some problems came up. According to this research paper, the Chinese regime was supporting Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa as Mugabe's successor. In fact, he received ideological and military training in Beijing and Nanjing in the 1960s. Except, he was purged by Mugabe's wife. On top of that, over the past year, Mugabe declared a new raft of laws which put the economic rights of Zimbabweans above those of foreign investors, including China. Could the Chinese regime have been getting worried about its investments there and gave some level of support to a military coup that was backing Mnangagwa? Now that Mugabe has officially resigned and is no longer president for life, I guess we'll never know for sure. Mnangagwa, by the way, is not a good guy either. His nickname is the Crocodile. He's a former head of Zimbabwe's secret police and is believed to have orchestrated a massacre that killed 20,000 civilians. And good news, the Crocodile was sworn in today as Zimbabwe's interim president. Meanwhile, in China, scholars from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, which has some very close ties to the Communist Party, have been wheeled out to talk about how bad a job Mugabe has been doing, saying Zimbabwe was careening off a cliff, and hinting that the next leader of Zimbabwe should open the country up. But you know who's been really upset by this whole thing? Venezuela. Another country with lots of economic deals with China that are under threat because of corruption and economic turmoil. I wonder if they're getting a little nervous. So did China know of or give approval for the Zimbabwe coup? Or are they just using it to their advantage? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. After a while, Crocodile. You know, I've always thought I'd make a really good president for life. I mean, just check out all the great work I've done on ChinaUncensored.tv. Politics, economics, scandals, I've covered it all. Check it out at ChinaUncensored.tv and cast your vote for me today. It's mandatory.